I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the balloons. Pink, gold, and silver, bobbing at the end of my gravel driveway like cheerful guards announcing a takeover. A handwritten sign leaned against my mailbox. "Welcome to Maple Creek Estates HOA, community meeting today." The only problem? I never joined any HOA. My home sat on 6 acres of old farmland, well outside the subdivision that had sprouted up over the past year. I'd bought the property precisely because it wasn't part of their cookie-cutter world. No bylaws, no monthly fees, no one telling me what color my shed had to be. So when a lady in pastel yoga pants and a glittery HOA president name tag marched up my porch steps holding a clipboard, I already knew it was going to be one of those conversations. She introduced herself as Karen, because of course she did, and started with that tight smile people wear when they're about to insult you politely. "We're so excited to have you as part of our growing community," she said, as if I'd signed adoption papers without realizing it. She waved toward the cul-de-sac beyond my property line, where 5 nearly identical houses stood gleaming in the sun. "We just voted to expand the association boundaries to include the surrounding properties, yours among them. Isn't that wonderful?" I told her flatly, "No, that's not legal. You can't just vote to take over land you don't own." Her smile flickered like a candle in a draft. "Oh, it's all perfectly legitimate," she insisted, flipping through her clipboard. "We've consulted the builder and a few county officials. You'll receive the welcome packet in the mail soon." She said it like a threat wrapped in gift paper. Then she added, "Of course, there's a small annual fee, but that covers landscaping, security patrols, and community maintenance." I looked out at my overgrown field, the broken-down tractor near the barn, the chickens pecking by the coop. "Karen," I said, "I am the maintenance." She laughed, that brittle sound like glass under stress. "Well, if you'd like to maintain your property, you'll need to submit the appropriate forms. We can't have farm equipment lying around." That was the moment I realized she wasn't confused, she was colonizing. She saw my land as part of her growing empire, and me as the first holdout to be conquered. I told her I wasn't interested, that my property wasn't subject to her rules, and that I'd appreciate if she stayed off it. She gave me a look usually reserved for stray dogs that wander into luxury lobbies. "I'll give you time to reconsider," she said coldly, stepping back down the porch. "But I'd hate for noncompliance to reflect poorly on your community's standing." That was day 1. By day 3, I had HOA flyers in my mailbox, taped to my fence, even tucked under my truck's wipers. They listed mandatory improvements for my property: repaint the barn, remove the unauthorized livestock, and replace my gravel driveway with approved materials. The letters were unsigned but printed on Maple Creek HOA letterhead. I kept them all in a drawer, because I could already see where this was heading. The first real confrontation came a week later. I was repairing the chicken coop when I heard arguing near the fence line. Karen and 2 of her board members, a man in golf shorts and another in a floral dress, were measuring something with a tape. When I approached, Karen turned to me as if I'd interrupted her at a press conference. "We're just marking the new boundary," she said. "This area will be common space for the HOA park extension." She was standing 10 feet inside my property line. I pulled out my phone, took a photo, and said, "Congratulations. You just trespassed." Her jaw tightened. "You'll regret being difficult," she said. "No one likes a neighbor who refuses to cooperate." The man with the tape muttered something about troublemakers always making it hard, and they left, muttering, but not before planting one of their little metal, HOA property, no dumping signs in my field. I left it there for a day, just so I could film myself yanking it out and throwing it in my burn barrel. The video got a few thousand views online, mostly people laughing at the audacity. Karen must have seen it, because 2 days later, she called the county inspector. The inspector showed up apologetically. "Got a complaint about unsafe livestock housing," he said. He looked around, took one glance at my brand new coop, and sighed. "You're fine," he muttered, but someone clearly wants to waste your time. I offered him coffee, he declined, and as he left, I saw Karen watching from across the street in her Lexus, engine idling. She smiled when she saw me notice. It wasn't the smile of someone who'd lost. It was the smile of someone testing the fence for weak spots. I decided to push back quietly. I installed security cameras, renewed my land survey, and requested written confirmation from the county clerk that my property sat outside Maple Creek's jurisdiction. The clerk emailed back the next morning. Confirmed. Lot 217A is independent, not subject to any HOA authority. I printed 5 copies and mailed one directly to Karen with a sticky note that said, "For your records." That was when the escalation truly began. That night, someone slashed my tires. The next day, I found my mailbox flattened. I didn't have proof, so I didn't bother calling the police, yet. But I did install motion lights and flood cams. I also made sure the footage uploaded automatically to the cloud. The next morning, my cameras caught her. Karen, in her signature pastel workout outfit, sneaking across my driveway at dawn, holding something metallic, looked like a garden claw, and scraping my truck's paint. I couldn't believe it. The HOA president committing petty vandalism before sunrise. I downloaded the footage, labeled it Karen the HOA Ninja, and stored it safely. When I confronted her later that day, she didn't deny it. She actually rolled her eyes. "You shouldn't park eyesores like that near community view corridors," she said. "If you insist on resisting integration, don't be surprised if people act out." That was when I realized. She truly thought she was justified. Her HOA wasn't just about property, it was about control, image, dominance. And my messy, independent little farm didn't fit her vision of Maple Creek. I warned her to stay off my property or I'd press charges. She smirked and said, "Go ahead. You'll only embarrass yourself. Everyone knows you're the difficult one." Then she drove off, leaving a cloud of self-righteous dust behind her. For a week, things went quiet. No flyers, no trespassers, no new signs. I thought maybe she'd gotten bored. Then one morning, I stepped outside and smelled something odd, a faint whiff of gasoline near my shed. I followed the scent to find a half-empty plastic container discarded behind the coop. My stomach dropped. I checked my cameras, but the cloud server showed nothing after midnight. Someone had disabled the system. That's when I realized this wasn't about neighborhood politics anymore. Karen had decided to win, no matter what it took. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the living room, lights off, shotgun leaning beside the couch, watching the glow of her porch light across the street. At 2:43 a.m., I saw movement, headlights flickering through my trees, the sound of a car idling too long. I slipped outside quietly, heart pounding. By the time I reached the edge of the porch, the engine revved and the car sped off. I couldn't see who it was, but I knew. And deep down, I knew this wouldn't end with signs or slashed tires anymore. It would end with fire. The next morning, I woke to the smell of burnt plastic. My heart stopped for a moment until I realized it wasn't coming from inside. Outside, by the fence, one of my trash bins was melted halfway down, blackened from what looked like a chemical burn. The lid had fused to the rim, and the ground around it reeked of gasoline. The chickens were huddled silently under the coop. My dog, Jasper, wouldn't stop barking toward the tree line. I checked my cameras again. Nothing. Every feed had gone offline around midnight, the same time the motion lights failed. Someone had cut the power to my external system, neatly, with wire cutters. I stood there, staring at the melted bin, and thought, so this is what we're doing now. When I called the sheriff's department, the deputy took a report but didn't seem hopeful. "Could have been kids," he said. "Or maybe an accident." I showed him the cleanly cut camera cables. He frowned but only said, "We'll keep an eye out." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You know that new HOA's been filing a lot of nuisance reports lately. They've mentioned your property in a few." I asked what kind of reports. "Noise, debris, unauthorized livestock, the usual," he said. Nothing stuck, but they seem motivated. I thanked him, but inside I was seething. Karen wasn't just trying to pressure me, she was building a paper trail to make me look like a problem. 2 days later, I found out just how far she'd go. I came home from work to find a notice of code violation taped to my front door. According to the document, I was in violation of Community Development Standards for unapproved structures and non-conforming agricultural activity. It bore the Maple Creek HOA letterhead but was stamped with a fake county seal. The font wasn't even right. I drove straight to the county office the next morning. The clerk took one look inside. "This isn't from us," she said. "This is someone trying to impersonate a county officer. That's a crime." She asked for copies and promised to escalate it. I didn't need to guess who'd sent it. The handwriting on the envelope matched Karen's earlier notes, the same curly loops on her Y and G. I considered confronting her, but that was exactly what she wanted. Instead, I went quiet. I replaced my cameras with a new set, wireless this time, and routed them through a secure connection she couldn't tamper with. I installed motion sensors near the tree line and even set up a decoy camera near the mailbox, something obvious enough to draw attention. I figured if she came snooping again, I'd catch her red-handed. But Karen must have sensed the silence as defiance, because the following weekend she brought backup. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the rumble of multiple engines. 3 SUVs pulled into my driveway, blocking my truck. Out stepped Karen, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 men in polos and a woman with a body cam clipped to her shirt. "Good morning," she called out, loud enough to wake the dead. "We're conducting a community inspection." The audacity nearly made me laugh. "You're trespassing," I said evenly. "Leave my property." She waved a sheet of paper. "According to the newly ratified annexation agreement, this land is now part of Maple Creek Estate. That means you're subject to our oversight." I could have shouted. Instead, I smiled. "Fantastic. Let's see that agreement." She hesitated, then handed it over like a magician revealing a trick too early. The document was signed by her and 2 board members. No county stamps, no developer signatures, just Karen's triumphant scrawl. "You know this isn't legally binding," I said. "You can't just annex property with crayons and confidence." One of the men, probably her husband, stepped forward. "You're being uncooperative. We can file for a lien." I folded the paper neatly and said, "Do that. But first, I'd like you to smile for the camera." I pointed to the security lens above my porch. The woman with the body cam flinched. They left, muttering threats about civil action. That afternoon, I uploaded the footage online with the caption, "HOA tries to annex my farm. Brings fake officials." It exploded overnight. Thousands of comments mocked Karen's group. Someone even dug up Maple Creek's website and found that Karen had listed herself as president, CEO, and founder. People joked she was running a dictatorship with bake sales. By morning, she deleted the HOA's Facebook page, but not before screenshots spread everywhere. For a day or two, I thought I'd finally won. Then she retaliated. It began subtly. A few of my feed stores suddenly lost my regular order. My trash service stopped picking up at the gate. When I called, they said they'd been told my address was vacant. My insurance agent emailed asking if I planned to change my residential classification. Someone had called pretending to be me. I felt the walls closing in, not physically but bureaucratically. It was death by paperwork. I reported the harassment to the sheriff again, but without hard evidence, there wasn't much they could do. 3 nights later, I caught her again. Around 1 a.m., my motion alert pinged. I opened the feed and saw 2 figures sneaking near my barn, one carrying a jug. My heart hammered. I called 911 immediately, whispering into the phone. Before deputies arrived, the pair bolted, their headlights disappearing down the road. When the officers searched the area, they found the jug half empty, stinking of fuel. This time, the sheriff himself came by. He was an older man named Carter, and unlike the deputies, he didn't shrug it off. "We'll open an arson investigation," he said. "But if she's the one behind this, you need to be careful. People like her don't back down, they escalate." He wasn't wrong. The next morning, Karen was on my porch again, smiling as if we were old friends. "Oh, Sheriff Carter dropped by my house," she said cheerily. "Asked some strange questions about fuel storage. I told him we keep extra for the generator." "You didn't send him to harass me, did you?" I said nothing. She leaned closer. "You're making a fool of yourself. No one will believe your little stories. Everyone knows you're unstable." She patted my arm and added softly, "You should really think about selling. Before you burn out." The way she said burn made my skin crawl. That night, I parked my truck at a friend's property down the road and set up a hidden camera facing the barn from a new angle. I didn't tell anyone where I'd gone, not even my coworkers. I wanted to see what she'd do when she thought I wasn't home. Around 2:17 a.m., headlights approached slowly, then stopped near the fence. A figure climbed out, short, stocky, wearing a hoodie. She walked to the barn, unscrewed the cap on a gas can, and started pouring it along the baseboards. My jaw locked. Then, as if in slow motion, she flicked a lighter. A tiny bloom of orange flared, and went out. She tried again. Before she could succeed, a loud shout came from off-screen. Sheriff Carter himself, staking out the area, had caught her in the act. She froze, dropped the lighter, and bolted toward the car, but his cruiser blocked the exit. When I arrived 10 minutes later, she was handcuffed, screaming that it was all a setup. Carter gave me a weary look. "Caught her red-handed," he said. "Says she was trying to dispose of flammable debris." I almost laughed, but all I could feel was relief, until Carter added, "We'll process her, but she'll probably be out on bail by morning." And she was. By noon, her Lexus was back in her driveway. She stood outside, glaring across the road like a general plotting her next move. I knew she'd cross a line eventually, but I didn't realize how far she was willing to go until 3 nights later, when I woke to the sound of glass shattering, and the world outside my window glowed orange. When I woke to the sound of breaking glass, my first thought was that the barn was on fire again. But when I looked out the window, I saw something far worse. The flames weren't coming from the barn. They were licking the side of my house. I stumbled out of bed, lungs filling with smoke before I could even reach the door. The air was thick, heavy, and tasted like melted paint. Somewhere behind me, the smoke alarm shrieked uselessly. Jasper barked frantically at the bedroom door. I grabbed him by the collar and threw open the nearest window, shoving him through first before climbing out after him. The cold night air hit like a punch. My front porch was already engulfed. The wooden beams cracked and spat sparks as the fire climbed the siding. My heart hammered in my chest as I ran barefoot across the gravel, coughing hard enough to see stars. I reached the far side of the driveway just as a muffled explosion erupted, my propane tank. The blast knocked me off my feet. When I looked up, the whole front half of my home was a rolling inferno. I could feel the heat even from 50 feet away. My house, the one I'd rebuilt board by board, the one my grandfather left me, I was being swallowed alive. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice felt surreal against the chaos around me. "Stay clear of the structure," she said. "Help is on the way." I told her there was gasoline, lots of it. That it wasn't an accident. I didn't even need proof. I could smell it. A thick, oily tang cut through the smoke like truth itself. When the first siren wailed in the distance, I almost cried with relief. But then I saw her. Karen stood at the edge of her driveway, arms folded, phone in hand, her face lit orange by the flames. She wasn't screaming or crying or running for help. She was watching. For a moment, our eyes met through the haze, and I saw nothing but satisfaction. She didn't need to say anything. Her expression said it all. This is what happens when you don't comply. The fire trucks arrived minutes later, but it felt like hours. They fought to keep the blaze from spreading to the barn, dousing it in water and foam. I sat on the gravel, wrapped in a blanket, Jasper trembling against my leg. A paramedic checked my vitals and asked if I had any enemies. I just laughed bitterly and said, "Yeah. She's standing right over there pretending to film the damage." When the sheriff pulled up, it was Carter again. He took one look at the wreckage, then at Karen, who was already giving a statement to another deputy. "I thought we stopped this," he muttered. "Guess we didn't stop her soon enough." By dawn, there wasn't much left. The roof had collapsed inward, the porch was gone, and everything I owned was either ash or twisted metal. The sun rose pale and cold over what looked like a war zone. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the road, whispering behind their hands. Karen hovered near them, giving interviews like she was some kind of community hero. I overheard her saying, "It's such a tragedy. We warned him about unsafe materials. Maybe now the county will finally enforce the standards." That line nearly broke me. She was already rewriting the story, as if she'd been the responsible one all along. Sheriff Carter pulled me aside. "We'll get a full arson unit out here," he said. "But I'll be honest, she's lawyered up before and she's smart. Don't confront her directly. Let us handle it." I wanted to trust him, but after what I'd seen, I knew Karen wouldn't stop just because a badge told her to. She was fighting for control, and I'd humiliated her publicly. This was her revenge, her way of restoring the hierarchy in her head where she always came out on top. For 2 days, I lived in my truck, parked by what used to be my garden. Reporters showed up. They asked about tensions with the HOA, about the viral videos. I told them the truth. She tried to annex my land, vandalized my property, and now my house burned down. They nodded sympathetically but couldn't print it without proof. Proof I thought I'd lost, until I checked my cloud backup. My new cameras had uploaded the final clip only minutes before the system melted. The feed was grainy, distorted by smoke, but unmistakable, a figure creeping near the porch carrying a fuel can. A flash, then fire. And as the light flared, the face came into view, Karen's. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. Carter watched the footage twice, silent. When it ended, he leaned back and said, "This is enough for a warrant." Relief surged through me, but only briefly. He added, "We'll move carefully. If we spook her, she'll run, or worse." He promised to contact the district attorney and told me to stay somewhere safe. I checked into a cheap roadside motel under a different name. I should have felt secure, but every creak in the wall made my pulse jump. Karen had crossed into madness, and I'd lit a fuse under her pride. 2 nights later, someone knocked on my motel door. I froze, checking the peephole. It wasn't the sheriff, it was one of Karen's board members, the same guy from before with the golf shorts. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. I opened the door halfway. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He nodded. "I know. I can't do this anymore. She's gone too far." His hands trembled as he handed me an envelope. "She made us sign statements. False ones. Said if we didn't, she'd fine us or report us to the county." Inside the envelope were copies of letters addressed to the HOA board, fabricated complaints about my property. "She said she was protecting property values," he whispered. "But she bragged last week that you'd finally get what's coming." I didn't think she meant this. I gave the envelope to Carter the next morning. He looked grim. "This helps," he said. "A lot." By afternoon, a warrant went out for Karen's arrest. Arson, insurance fraud, and criminal mischief. Deputies raided her home while she was hosting what she called a community support brunch. They found multiple gas cans, my stolen mail, and printed drafts of fake county letters. But the kicker? Her laptop contained drafts of posts she'd planned to leak, painting me as a disgruntled neighbor who accidentally set fire to his own home during illegal burning. She had been crafting her own narrative in advance. Karen was booked that evening. I thought it was over. I really did. News of her arrest spread fast. Locals couldn't believe it. The same woman who lectured about aesthetic uniformity and moral standards was behind bars. But power was her drug, and jail wasn't detox. It was a delay. She posted bail within 48 hours, stepping out of the county jail with sunglasses and a smirk, acting like it was all a misunderstanding. Her lawyer released a statement saying she was deeply saddened by baseless accusations and confident justice would prevail. Meanwhile, my insurance company dragged their feet, saying they couldn't process the claim until the investigation concluded. I was living out of my truck again, fighting exhaustion, anger, and the gnawing sense that she'd somehow twist everything to her advantage. She always did. Then, on the third night after her release, something eerie happened. I was parked near what remained of the barn, trying to sleep, when I saw movement on the edge of the field. A flashlight beam danced through the smoke-stained grass. My blood ran cold. I turned on my dash camera and watched. A figure walked toward the ruins of my house, slowly, almost reverently. When the light swept across her face, there was no mistaking it. It was Karen, again, trespassing on the ashes. She stood there for a long time, staring at the wreckage, then whispered something I couldn't hear. Before leaving, she knelt and pressed something into the dirt near the mailbox. In the morning, I went to check. Buried halfway was a folded flyer, one of her HOA newsletters, printed fresh. Across the top, in big bold letters, "Welcome to our community." Below, in her handwriting, "One way or another." That was when I realized she hadn't lost. She'd just started a new phase. And this time, she wasn't hiding behind bylaws or fake letters. She was going to destroy me in plain sight. It's strange how quickly people get used to ruins. A week after the fire, the smell had faded to something faintly metallic, like wet nails and smoke-soaked dirt. My land felt hollow, like it remembered being alive but couldn't explain how. The insurance adjuster finally came by, walking in slow circles around the remains with a clipboard. He didn't say much, just took photos and muttered words like liability and pending. I asked when I could expect payment. He frowned. "Once the investigation wraps," he said. "The fire marshal's report isn't finalized yet, and the arson suspect's defense is contesting the footage. In other words, don't hold your breath." Karen had filed an appeal. Her lawyer claimed the video was edited and contextually misleading. According to her, she'd come over to check on a reported gas leak and accidentally dropped her lighter. The audacity would have been hilarious if it weren't destroying my life. Still, I kept quiet. Carter told me patience was the best weapon. "She thrives on conflict," he said. "Don't give her fuel." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. But staying silent didn't mean doing nothing. While she strutted around pretending to be the victim, I started my own quiet war. First, I met with a private investigator, a retired fire inspector named Leon who'd seen everything from insurance scams to gang torchings. He looked over my footage, then the burn patterns, and nodded slowly. "This was deliberate," he said. "Accelerant poured along the windward wall, ignition point near the porch step. Classic external ignition. Whoever did this knew fire behavior." He smirked. "Not some dumb accident." He promised a full independent report. Next, I gathered witnesses. The HOA board member who'd brought me those letters agreed to testify. A couple of construction workers from the next development phase told me they'd seen Karen buying gas cans in bulk weeks before the fire. One even said she joked about keeping the riffraff in check. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was smoke thick enough to choke on. Meanwhile, Karen escalated her performance. She hosted community cleanups near my fence line, pretending to help beautify the area. In reality, she was staging photo ops with local reporters, talking about how tragedy brings neighbors together. The gall of it made my teeth ache. She'd burned my house and now wanted to turn the ashes into her PR campaign. She even had shirts printed, white polos with "Maple Creek Proud" embroidered over the heart. I caught her once, directing volunteers to plant flowers along my property's edge. I told her to get off my land. She smiled sweetly and said, "Just giving back to the community, dear." I told her I'd call the sheriff. She didn't flinch. "Oh, he's already here," she said, pointing to Carter's cruiser rolling down the road. Carter stepped out, looking tired. "What now?" he asked. I gestured to her group. "Trespassing." Karen immediately launched into her routine. "We're cleaning the community perimeter." "He's just being hostile again." Carter held up a hand. "Enough. Everyone off the property." She pouted but obeyed, her volunteers trailing behind like ducklings. As she left, she whispered, "It's a shame you can't appreciate teamwork." I said, "It's a shame you confuse teamwork with tyranny." Later that night, I sat in my truck replaying everything that had happened since the day she'd first appeared with her clipboard. It all started with a sign and a smile. And now I was homeless. She'd taken so much already. My house, my peace, my reputation, but there was one thing she hadn't taken yet: control. And that, I realized, was what she hated most. Leon's report arrived 3 days later. It was meticulous, 50 pages of analysis, photos, and chemical tests. His conclusion was unequivocal: deliberate arson consistent with human action. He included residue analysis that matched the fuel samples deputies found in Karen's garage. It was airtight. I forwarded the report to Carter and my insurance adjuster. The sheriff called that night. "This changes everything," he said. "She can't spin her way out now." He promised new charges were coming, this time federal, since mail and insurance fraud were involved. But Karen had her own playbook. The next morning, I woke to find a drone hovering over my property. I threw a rock, it dodged neatly. 10 minutes later, another appeared. She was surveilling me again. I drove across the street and confronted her. She stood on her porch, coffee in hand, utterly calm. "Private property," I said. "That drone crosses the line again, and I'll have it confiscated." She raised an eyebrow. "You're being paranoid. We're documenting community restoration efforts." Then she smiled. "Smile for the camera, neighbor." That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized reasoning with her was like arguing with a wildfire. It didn't care, it just consumed. So I decided to fight her the way she fought everyone else. Quietly, strategically, and without warning. I filed a civil harassment restraining order. I provided Leon's report, the drone footage, and copies of her letters. The judge issued a temporary order that barred her from coming within 300 feet of my property. For the first time in months, I felt the smallest spark of victory. But Karen didn't abide by court orders. She treated them like optional HOA guidelines. 2 days later, she parked her Lexus exactly 299 feet from my driveway and sat there for an hour, engine idling, staring at the ruins of my house. When I walked toward her, she rolled down the window and said softly, "I'm not trespassing. I measured." Then she drove off, leaving tire tracks like claw marks across the gravel. I knew she wanted me to snap. Every word, every glance was bait, to make me look unstable, dangerous, the villain of her story. So I refused to take it. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I hired a contractor friend to clear the debris. Every day, I worked alongside him, hauling out blackened boards and rusted nails. It was grueling, but also cleansing. Each shovel of ash felt like reclaiming an inch of sanity. But Karen couldn't stand seeing progress. One afternoon, as we loaded scrap into a dumpster, she showed up with a clipboard again. "Some habits die hard. You need a demolition permit for this," she said sweetly. "Wouldn't want you violating community codes." I laughed out loud. "Karen, there is no community code." She gave me that frozen smile. "There will be. Soon enough." Then she handed me another envelope, her HOA's new policy revision. It listed reconstruction guidelines that forbade non-conforming materials and rural-style architecture. Translation: she was trying to control how I rebuilt my own house. That night, I drafted a letter of my own. Short, direct, and lethal, a cease and desist order backed by my attorney. I mailed it certified copy to the sheriff. She ignored it, of course, but it set the stage. Because 2 days later, when she crossed the property line again, Carter was ready. Deputies arrested her for violating the restraining order. This time, no bail. Her face as they cuffed her was pure venom, eyes wide, mouth trembling, like someone watching her kingdom collapse. As they led her to the car, she hissed, "You think this is over? You'll regret this." For the first time, I believed she might be right. Not because she'd win, but because people like her never stop. Even from behind bars, she'd find a way to claw back attention. And she did. A week later, someone hacked into my insurance account. My rebuild claim was cancelled. The adjuster said the request came from my email, complete with my signature. I hadn't sent it. The IP trace led to a public Wi-Fi near the county detention center. Carter confirmed she'd made a call that day, to one of her board members. Somehow, she'd convinced someone on the outside to keep the harassment going. I realized then, this wasn't about land anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about domination. She wanted to prove she could still control me, even locked away. So I decided to turn the tables for good. I gathered everything, every letter, every video, every voicemail. Leon helped me organize it into a single case file. We delivered it to a local news outlet under one condition: publish only after cross-verifying with the sheriff's office. 2 weeks later, the headline hit the front page. HOA president accused of arson, fraud, and harassment in rural land dispute. Her face was everywhere. Her smile, that same brittle confidence now twisted into infamy. The story went national. Talk shows mocked her, lawyers dissected her behavior, and people online started calling her the HOA pyromaniac. That night, sitting by the remains of my house under a sky full of quiet stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the kind of person who fades into shame. She was the kind who waits, quietly plotting, until the spotlight moves, then strikes again. And sure enough, before dawn, I got a call from Carter. His voice was grave. She escaped. When Carter called to tell me she'd escaped, I thought he was joking. Escaped from what? I asked. House arrest? She's got a private yoga dome, or something? His silence on the other end told me it wasn't a joke. Karen had been held temporarily at the county detention facility after violating the restraining order. Sometime between a medical check and a scheduled court hearing, she slipped out through a side exit used by delivery contractors. They found the door propped open with a rubber mat. Security footage showed her in an orange jumpsuit, walking calmly through the loading dock with a stolen badge around her neck. She didn't even run. She just left. By the time I hung up, local radio was already covering it. Former HOA president accused of arson escapes custody. Police urge residents to remain vigilant. Vigilant. That word didn't even begin to cover it. I didn't know what she'd do next, but I knew her patterns. She always came back to the scene, always needed to prove she was in control. So I stayed awake that night, shotgun leaning against my leg, cameras live, truck idling near the gate. The land was quiet except for crickets and wind, but silence around here had become the loudest warning. She waited 3 nights. At 3:14 a.m., my motion alert buzzed. I looked at the feed. A figure crept along the far fence, dragging something metallic, maybe a shovel or crowbar. My stomach dropped. I switched on the floodlights, and she froze in the glare. Even from 100 feet away, I recognized her stance. One hand on her hip, head tilted with that same smug defiance. Karen. She'd cut her hair short, dyed it dark, but her posture gave her away. I stepped outside, staying behind the open door of my truck. "You're done, Karen," I shouted. "Go home before someone gets hurt." She laughed, a thin, eerie sound that echoed over the field. "This is my home," she yelled back. "You ruined it. You ruined everything." Then she raised something, a gas can again. That's when I fired a warning shot into the dirt, the echo bouncing off the trees. She flinched but didn't drop it. "You can't shoot me," she screamed. "This is community property." The sirens came faster this time. Carter must have tracked her GPS ankle monitor. 2 patrol cars crested the hill, lights painting the night in blue and red. Karen froze mid-rant, eyes darting toward them. "You told them," she hissed. "You always hide behind other people." She started to run, but gravel betrayed her. Deputies tackled her before she reached the fence. Even pinned to the ground, she kept shouting about unlawful annexation and property reclamation. I stood there shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Watching her dragged away again felt like watching a nightmare try to climb out of its own ashes. Afterward, Carter approached, hat in hand. "She's finished this time," he said. "She'll be transferred to state custody. No more bail." I wanted to believe him. But belief had burned away months ago, along with my home. I just nodded. "Make sure she doesn't come back," I said. For a few weeks, she didn't. The sheriff's office confirmed she'd been remanded to a psychiatric unit pending trial. The doctors called it obsessive control disorder exacerbated by community delusion. I called it karma with clinical paperwork. Slowly, life started to feel like life again. Insurance finally approved my rebuild. Contractors poured new foundations. Neighbors, real ones, the kind who just wave and mind their business, brought coffee and sandwiches. For the first time in months, I could look at my land without feeling anger twist in my chest. But peace, as I'd learned, was temporary currency. About a month into reconstruction, strange things started happening again. My contractor's truck was vandalized, windshield smashed, tires slashed. Someone broke into the supply shed and poured paint thinner over new lumber. The night after that, I heard music playing faintly through the trees, soft classical piano. It took me a few minutes to realize the tune was "Burning Down the House" by Talking Heads. Someone had a sense of humor, and I knew exactly whose it was. I called Carter again. "She's supposed to be in a psych facility," I said. He sighed. "She is. Checked yesterday. But she still has supporters, people from the HOA. Some of them think she's being framed." I remembered the board member who'd helped me earlier, how nervous he'd been. "You think she's pulling strings from inside?" I asked. "Wouldn't be the first time," he said grimly. That night, I caught one of them. A middle-aged woman I recognized from Karen's cleanup crew was sneaking near my new foundation, holding a can of kerosene. I didn't yell. I just turned on the lights. She froze like a deer. "She told me it was symbolic," she whispered as deputies cuffed her. "She said the fire purifies." The phrase stuck with me. Fire purifies. It sounded like something Karen would say in court rehearsals. Grand, self-righteous, delusional. That's when I realized she wasn't just obsessed with me. She believed she was on some moral crusade, cleansing her community of contamination. And I was her contamination. The trial began 2 months later. By then, I'd rebuilt the house's frame and replaced the barn roof. I attended every session, sitting in the back with Carter. Karen wore a beige suit instead of her usual pastels, hair pulled back tightly, her voice calm and steady. She played the victim perfectly. "I only ever wanted to protect our neighborhood," she said, eyes glistening. "He threatened me. He frightened everyone." Her lawyer nodded solemnly, spinning a tale about a disgruntled landowner seeking fame. Then my turn came. The prosecutor showed the footage of her lighting the first fire, Leon's report, and the restraining order violation video. Karen's mask cracked for the first time when my drone footage from that night appeared on the screen. "That's doctored," she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The judge ordered her to sit. She refused. "You're all blind," she screamed. "This man destroyed Maple Creek." Deputies had to escort her out. The verdict came the next day, guilty on all counts. Arson, fraud, harassment. 5 years in state prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I just felt empty. No sentence could rebuild what she'd burned, not just wood and drywall, but time, safety, and the quiet joy of being left alone. Still, I moved forward. By fall, my new home stood finished, stronger, simpler, and entirely mine. I built a tall fence, installed new cameras, and planted wildflowers where the old porch had been. People online followed the story like it was some twisted reality show. They called it the HOA war. I didn't comment. I just wanted it over. Then winter came, and with it, one final surprise. A letter arrived, no return address, postmarked from a small town 3 counties over. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in her familiar looping script. You can rebuild your walls, but communities live forever. Enjoy your solitude while it lasts. No signature, no threats, just that haunting arrogance that never died. Carter traced the origin to a halfway house used by state psychiatric patients during transfer, but by the time they checked, she was gone. Vanished again. I could have moved. Sold the land, started fresh somewhere anonymous. But I didn't. Leaving would have meant she won, even in absence. So I stayed. I rebuilt every inch with my own hands. New beams, new paint, new locks. Every nail was defiance hammered into place. And then, one morning in early spring, something remarkable happened. The first tulips bloomed along the fence where she'd planted those flowers for her community cleanup. They'd survived the fires, the storms, the ashes, roots buried deep enough to outlast everything. I let them stay. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as a warning. Sometimes, at night, I still catch myself looking toward her old house across the road. It's empty now, foreclosed after her conviction. The windows are boarded, the mailbox rusted shut. But in certain light, it almost looks like someone's still there, watching. Maybe it's my imagination, maybe not. All I know is that peace doesn't mean the war never happened. It means I built something stronger out of the wreckage. And if she ever does come back, if she ever sets one foot past that fence again, this time, I won't just defend my home. I'll defend the last piece of my life she hasn't managed to burn. For almost 6 months, nothing happened. The news moved on. Maple Creek went quiet. The charred lot across from me sat empty, overgrown with weeds and rumors. Some said Karen was in Mexico under a new name. Others swore they'd seen her at a gas station near the county line, hair dyed red, driving a white rental car. I stopped asking questions. I wanted peace more than answers. My rebuilt house finally felt like home again. Solid walls, new furniture, fresh paint, and silence that didn't sound like fear. But peace has a way of making you forget how fragile it is. It started with the mail again. One morning, a glossy brochure appeared in my box. Introducing Maple Creek Phase 2, Luxury Lakeside Homes. Now accepting founding members. The rendering showed sleek, modern houses, and right in the corner, in gold lettering, it said, an exclusive Karen brand community. I thought it was a prank, some troll cashing in on the viral story. Then I saw the contact email. It wasn't a company domain. It was a personal address. Hers. I called Carter immediately. He sounded older, wearier. We've heard whispers, he said. Someone using her name to bait investors. We're looking into it. When I asked if she could be involved directly, he hesitated before answering. Her discharge hearing was 2 weeks ago. State hospital signed off on her release, supervised care only. I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. They let her out? She convinced the board she was rehabilitated. Promised to move out of state. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night the nightmares returned. Flames crawling up walls. Her voice in the smoke whispering, "Community means control." I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a hammer. I checked my cameras out of habit. Everything looked normal until I saw it. One of the tulips by the fence had been uprooted, replaced with a small, handwritten sign. I zoomed in. The words read, "Welcome back, neighbor." I didn't call Carter. I didn't even tell anyone. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the feed, realizing she was out there again, somewhere close, patient, waiting for her moment. But this time, I wasn't the same man she'd burned out of his own home. I wasn't scared. I was ready. For the next week, I prepared. I reinforced the fence with motion-triggered alarms. Installed new sensors on every window. Even buried steel plates under the gravel driveway to prevent tampering. I slept during the day and watched at night. Nothing happened until Friday. At 2:07 a.m., the gate sensor tripped. Then another, closer to the porch. I pulled up the feed. A figure in black was crouched near my truck, holding a small plastic container. The lid glinted under the floodlight. Gasoline again. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and stepped outside quietly, staying behind the door frame. She didn't see me until I spoke. "Drop it." Her head jerked up. The hood fell back, revealing the unmistakable smirk I'd seen in so many nightmares. "You rebuilt," she said, her voice hoarse. "How sweet." "Karen, it's over." She laughed softly. "Over? Oh no. You never understood. It was never about the house." She gestured around wildly. "You humiliated me. You made me a meme. My name, my legacy, a joke. You think I can live with that? Then don't," I said coldly. "Walk away." But she didn't. She stepped closer, sloshing fuel across the gravel. "This place doesn't belong to you. None of it does. Communities need leadership. Communities need sanity," I shot back. Something flickered in her eyes, a flash of the old rage, that bottomless need to dominate. She pulled a lighter from her pocket. "You'll thank me later," she whispered. I fired the flare gun first. It wasn't lethal, but it was loud and bright, a streak of fire that exploded in front of her, blinding her. She screamed and stumbled backward, dropping both the can and the lighter. The lighter ignited the spilled fuel, sending up a sudden wall of flame between us. I fell back as the fire roared to life, lighting her face in a flickering orange halo. For a second, she looked exactly as I remembered her that night months ago, half-lit, eyes wide, surrounded by the thing she worshipped most. Sirens again. Carter's voice on the radio shouting my name. Deputies swarmed the property. By the time the fire was out, Karen was gone, vanished into the woods beyond the fence. They searched for hours, found footprints leading to the road, tire marks, then nothing. The official report called it attempted arson and evasion. I called it unfinished business. Days turned into weeks. The police combed nearby towns, checked hospitals, border logs. Nothing. She'd disappeared like smoke. Some locals claimed she drowned in the lake. Others swore they saw her hitchhiking north. I wanted to believe she was gone for good, but deep down I knew better. People like Karen don't disappear. They linger, invisible, in the cracks of your mind. Then one morning, while rebuilding the garden fence, I heard a sound that froze me. Laughter. Faint, distorted, coming from the old intercom speaker near my shed. The one connected to my phone system. I hadn't used it in months. I approached slowly. The speaker crackled, and her voice came through, calm, almost playful. "You can't fence in fire," she said. Then the line went dead. I disconnected every wire, smashed the device, burned it in the pit, and buried the ashes. But I didn't tell anyone. Because by then, I realized something no one else had. Karen wasn't trying to destroy me anymore. She wanted to exist through me. Every camera I checked, every alarm I tested, every sleepless night thinking of her, she lived in that space between fear and memory. And that's what I refused to give her. So I made a decision. I sold half the land to a conservation trust. No homeowners, no developments, just open space. The rest I kept. I turned it into a small rescue farm, adopting animals from burned or abandoned properties. It felt fitting somehow, turning destruction into shelter. Reporters still emailed occasionally, asking for updates. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in fame. Just closure. A year later, I finally got it. Carter called one last time. "You should hear this from me," he said. "They found a body out past the state line. Burned in a car. Dental records match hers. For a moment, I couldn't speak. You're sure? Positive. Looks like she tried to torch another property out there. Gasoline backfired. Nobody else hurt. I thanked him, hung up, and walked outside. The air was cool, the sky wide and clear. I stood at the edge of the property, looking at the tulips still blooming by the fence. They'd survived 3 fires, 2 winters, and the worst neighbor imaginable. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not revenge, not justice, but endurance. The next day, I planted 1 more row of flowers along the old burn line. Red ones this time, bright, defiant, alive. Jasper ran circles around me while I worked, tail wagging, barking at nothing. I laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. When the sun dipped low, I went inside and poured myself a drink. For the first time since this all began, I didn't check the cameras. I didn't lock the windows twice. I didn't listen for footsteps outside. I just sat there in the quiet, watching the light fade over the fields. I refused to surrender. Because in the end, that's what she never understood. Control doesn't come from fear. It comes from letting go. And as night fell over the rebuilt farmhouse, I realized she hadn't burned my home. Not really. She'd just cleared the ground for something stronger to rise.